Welcome to this lesson on the core principles of ISO 37301, part of our introduction to its background and scope. This explainer is produced by EasyPathUni in coordination with Yazan Ibrahim. We're going to keep things interactive and simplified today, and you'll see we'll use real-world examples to make everything crystal clear. So let's dive in. We're tackling a standard that's all about building a rock-solid compliance framework, and we're going to break down its core principles to figure out how it helps companies build something, well, something truly priceless.
All right, to get us started, let me ask you a question. Think about it for a second. What is the single most valuable, but also the most fragile, asset that any company has? It's not the fancy tech, it's not the buildings they own, it's not even the money in the bank.
It's trust. Simple as that. The trust you get from your customers, your employees, your partners, even the regulators. And once that's broken, man, it is incredibly hard to get back. Building and protecting that trust, that's the whole point of the standard we're unpacking today.
So what exactly is ISO 37301? Well, think of it like this. It's an international standard that gives companies a blueprint for what's called a compliance management system, or CMS. I mean, we live in a global world, right? Companies are everywhere, so having a single recognized playbook is absolutely crucial. To put it simply, it's the ultimate guide for an organization to build and hang on to that priceless asset we just talked about, trust.
Okay, so here's what we've got on tap. We'll kick things off with a quick look at what this standard really is. Then we're going to get into the good stuff, the 4 essential pillars that hold it all together: integrity, transparency, accountability, and sustainability. And to wrap it all up, we'll see how these pieces fit together to build a real culture of trust.
All right, let's dive into our first section. What is ISO 37301? You can really think of it as the blueprint for organizational trust. So why does a compliance management system, a CMS, even matter? Look, it's not just about dodging fines, okay? It's a proactive system for making sure you meet all your obligations. We're talking legal, ethical, professional, the whole shebang. It's designed to systematically cut down on risk and, fundamentally boost an organization's integrity. It really comes down to building a company that does the right thing even when nobody's looking. Okay, that brings us to our first and maybe the most important pillar, the integrity foundation. This is all about sticking to your moral and ethical principles. It's basically the organization's moral compass. And, this quote just nails it. Integrity is the cornerstone of any compliance management system. I mean, without it, the whole thing is just built on sand. It is the absolute non-negotiable starting point. So the big question is, how do you make integrity something real, not just a buzzword on a poster? Well, it starts with a clear, written code of conduct. But let's be real, a piece of paper is useless unless leadership actually lives and breathes that code. And this is crucial. You have to have safe ways for people to speak up about problems and know for sure that they'll be protected. Okay, here's a real-world example, just like we promised. Imagine a manager is getting pressured by their boss to approve an expense report that, clearly breaks the rules. Integrity in action is that manager standing firm, pointing to the code of conduct, and just saying no. That one single act, it reinforces the entire system. All right, so we've got our foundation of integrity. Now you need to connect that to the outside world. And that brings us to our second pillar, the transparency link. This is all about openness and clear communication. Now, what's so interesting about transparency is that it's not just about sharing the good news. It's about creating clear, open channels for communication, making sure important info isn't buried in a bunch of corporate jargon. And here's the tough part. It's about being honest when things go wrong. Seriously, admitting to a failure can actually build more trust than trying to pretend it never happened. And here's a perfect example of that. Let's say a company has a data breach. They could try to sweep it under the rug, right? But a transparent company, they'll publicly report on it, they'll explain exactly what happened, and they'll detail the steps they're taking to make sure it doesn't happen again. So let me ask you, which of those companies would you trust more? Okay, moving on to pillar number 3, the accountability check. If you think of integrity as the what and transparency as the how, then accountability is the who. It's all about taking ownership. And this comparison really shows the difference. On one side, you've got a high accountability organization. Roles are crystal clear. Teams have what they need to succeed, and performance is actually monitored. On the other side, it's just a culture of finger-pointing, vague job descriptions, and zero follow-up when things fail. One of these drives success, and the other, well, it's a recipe for disaster.
So the bottom line is, when you build a real culture of accountability, the benefits are just huge. Your obligations actually get met consistently. Problems get fixed fast, and your employees feel empowered to do their jobs, not like they're being policed all the time. This is how you turn compliance from a burden into a powerful tool for getting better and better.
And that leads us perfectly into our fourth and final pillar, sustainable compliance. This one's all about making sure your system isn't just good for today, but that it's tough and adaptable enough for whatever comes tomorrow. See, compliance isn't a one-and-done project. It's a never-ending cycle. You have to constantly be assessing the landscape, looking for new risks and changing rules. Then you adapt your strategies. You have to truly integrate compliance into your main business goals. And finally, you've got to innovate using new tech to stay ahead of the curve. And why is this so important? Because a sustainable system completely flips the script. You go from being reactive, always putting out fires, to being proactive. You start anticipating problems before they even happen. And that is the secret sauce for long-term resilience and real lasting success. Okay, so let's bring this all home. We've looked at 4 separate pillars, but here's the thing. They don't work in isolation. They all have to work together to build a truly unshakable culture of trust.
And this is the perfect way to sum it up. Integrity, that's your ethical foundation. Transparency is the bridge you build to everyone who has a stake in your company. Accountability is the engine that actually drives action. And sustainability, that's your game plan for the future. You put them all together and you create an organization that isn't just compliant, it's deeply, genuinely trustworthy.
And that brings us right to our final thought for today. As you look back on these 4 pillars, I want to leave you with a question to mull over. Which one of these pillars does your organization, or heck, even just your own team, need to focus on strengthening first? Finding the answer to that, well, that could be the key to unlocking a whole new level of trust and success.